Unless you're living under a rock, you're probably aware that Mourinho got fired by Roma earlier this week. And once again, it happened right in the middle of his third season in charge. Chelsea, Real Madrid, Man.United and now Roma all had to make the difficult decision of firing the special one in his third season, which then created a myth of the third season curse. But now the question stands, is it real or merely a coincidence? Well, in this video, we'll analyze the factors that led to his sackings and see if there's anything in common that validates his supposed curse. And make sure you stay until the end, because I'm sure you'll be surprised with what you discover in this video. Now before we start, if this isn't the first time watching Thorn FC, please consider subscribing. With your help, we've already achieved 2,000 subscribers and now it's time to aim at 10k. Now without further ado, let's get right to it. For starters, let's kick things off with his first major sacking in football. And in case you're wondering why I said major, it's because the first club to fire him was actually Benfica. But I digress. His first stint with Chelsea ended just a few games into his fourth season after a series of poor results and a personal clash with then owner Roman Abramovich. At the time, both men got into a lot of public arguments about who was the main reason behind Chelsea's success. Abramovich's spending power or Mo's tactical vision and leadership. Couple that turbulence with Mourinho's shortcomings in the Champions League and you have the reason why he was fired from the Blues. This sacking doesn't really fall into the 3-year pattern, but I want you to memorize the reason why he was fired for context later in the video. The next time he left the club, he lasted exactly 3 seasons in charge of Real Madrid. To be fair, I think Mourinho's third season kind of overshadows what he accomplished in the Spanish capital. After all, he didn't coach Real in the original Galacticos era or in our current day and age. He managed them during Barcelona's strongest period in their entire history. During his stint, Barca won pretty much everything that there was to win and even reached 100 points in the league. Oh, and who could forget that guy that Barca had back then that scored 91 goals in 2012. Still, Mo rose to the challenge, conquered every domestic title, matched Barcelona's 100 points record league title win, turned Real into a respective European side again, but he couldn't ultimately win the Champions League. This might be hard to believe nowadays, but during 6 consecutive seasons, Real got eliminated in the round of 16 of the Champions League. Jose Mourinho ended that cold streak. He took Real to the semis in each of his 3 seasons in charge, but ultimately couldn't overcome that last hurdle. Besides, Florentino Perez didn't sign him to end the cold streak, he signed him to win the whole damn thing, which Mourinho couldn't do. But then again, that wasn't the reason why they fired him. His behavior outside the pitch isolated him more and more until no one was really on his side anymore. He clashed with Ramos, Benzema, Ronaldo, Casillas, De Boer, the journalists, even got into fights with opposing managers. So after an underwhelming season where Real only conquered the Spanish Super Cup while letting Barca fly with a league title, Mourinho and Real parted ways in 2013. Fast forward 2 years and Mourinho is on top of the world. The special one went against the logic of never going back to where you were once happy and now Chelsea conquered an iconic Premier League title, the third in his resume. In his third season in charge, Chelsea were seen as heavy favourites to win the league once more, since they had only lost 3 matches in the previous season. The core of the squad remained more or less the same, so why should the London outfit decline this time around? Well, in this occasion, I think one name kinda sums up the entire situation: Eva Carneiro. With very little left to play, Hazard went down to the ground, and Eva Carneiro decided by herself that the Belgian star needed to receive medical assistance. This incident left Mourinho furious. Her decision caused Chelsea to play the dying minutes of the game in disadvantage, so Mo was quick to blame her for being unable to win the match. The special one then banned her from attending the matches, and 6 weeks later she was fired. It's important to note that this episode happened in the opening day of the 2015-16 Premier League campaign and that the players loved working with Eva. Some, you might say, loved working with her just a little too much, if you know what I mean. Either way, that opening draw against Swansea would be considered pretty okay compared to the disastrous results Chelsea would endure in the next couple of months, as by the time Mourinho was finally fired, the club was closer to the relegation spots than they were to European qualification. Amidst all of this chaos, there were also constant reports of players getting tired of the special one's antics, with an unknown Chelsea player alleging he would much rather lose than win for Mourinho. This was a disaster and it seriously impacted Mourinho's reputation. If his Real Madrid tenure left some cracks in his armor, this one left a huge dent, and the certainty that Mourinho would have to do much more in his next venture if he wanted to keep his status as an elite club manager. Not even a year later, and Mourinho was working in the Prem once again. Against the odds, Mo signed with Manchester United, and despite his recent turbulent runs, many fans still hailed him as the rightful heir to Sir Alex's throne. And after a remarkable first season where he won the Europa League, Community Shield and League Cup, the future finally looked promising not only for the Red Devils, but also for Mourinho's career. Though he couldn't maintain that title-winning prowess in his second season, he achieved Man United's best league finish since Sir Alex departed, as second place with 81 points, something that he considers to this day one of the biggest wins in his career, given the circumstances behind the scenes. When the third season rolled around, many of us knew that this could be a make-or-break year for the special one, and unfortunately, he continued to follow the same pattern. Man United had a poor season start, and the fans quickly realized that there wouldn't be any return to glory that year. So, how did Mourinho justify his team's shortcomings? He criticized the board for not making a sufficient number of signings, publicly shamed his players, and surprise surprise, 3 years after his previous sacking, Mourinho was finally let go in December 2018, leaving United 19 points away from the league leaders and 11 away from the top 4. 1 year later, he would sign for Tottenham. I think it's pretty safe to say that this move marked an end of an era for Mourinho. No offense to Spurs, but if you went just a few years back in time, it would be ridiculous to see Mourinho manage a team that wasn't at least in the top 10 best in the world. I know Tottenham had been in the Champions League final just a few months before his arrival, but still, Spurs weren't really seen as a top candidate to win the Prem. I'm not gonna detail his Spurs run too much because it doesn't really fall in the 3-year pattern, but the reasons that led to his sacking were his public shaming of players, poor form, and this time, something that hadn't been brought up to the spotlight before. His defensive tactics, his reactive training, and the incapacity to build an effective attacking strategy. Football was evolving, but Mourinho refused to do the same. Later that year, Mourinho found another job. In a shocking return to Italy, the Portuguese manager signed with Roma, which was, from both a sporting and financial point of view, his most modest club since FC Porto. But that lack of pressure from the demanding English media was perfect for Mourinho. In his first season, he conquered the first edition of the Conference League and became the first manager to win all 3 major European competitions. 1 year later, Mo took Roma all the way to the Europa League final, where Sevilla were clearly benefited, but that doesn't really matter. In the eyes of the club's American owners, Roma lost the final, and Mourinho's antics after the match nearly cost him his job. But the fans loved him too much. Firing him in that context would destroy their reputation, so they kept him for another season, for his 3rd season. And once again, the same problems came to light. Mourinho clashed with some of his players, bashed the referees. In short, he was a public relations menace as usual. In the league, Mourinho was never able to improve Roma's performance. The board wanted to return to the Champions League, which, relying solely by the league standings, never even came close of happening. So, with Roma sitting in 9th place, Mourinho was once again fired. Now, after hearing the reasons behind every sacking, do you still think it's merely a coincidence? Well, I don't, and I'm gonna show you why. Mourinho always follows a curious path in his managerial stints that ultimately leads to his sacking more or less at the same time. Firstly, he usually galvanizes the squad, instilling them a winning spirit that had been either lost or never even existed in the first place. The results improve compared to the previous season, and even when he's unable to win any significant trophies, he'll rightfully use the excuse that his first months or full season in charge was merely a rebuild year. When the second season rolls around, Mo expects to be given trust and freedom to sign all the players he wants, no matter the outcome of his first term in charge. And now is where our story usually branches to 3 different paths that ultimately lead to the same outcome. Option A, Mourinho enjoys a positive season but warns the board that more reinforcement is needed to build on his success. Option B, Mourinho fails to improve the club, but in his eyes, it would be impossible since the board didn't sign the players he wanted to, therefore, more or better reinforcement is needed to succeed in his 3rd season. Option C, Mourinho receives the players he asked for and still fails to catapult the club to higher heights. In his case, a mixture of ref bias against him or lack of quality or commitment of the players is usually the culprit. Either way, he'll still ask for more reinforcement. No matter the scenario, the outcome is bound to be the same. His brashness with the media might be revered by fans, but imagine you're the one playing in one of his teams. You have a shitty game, and your manager, instead of privately talking to you about it, goes into a public rant about your performance or lack of fitness. Would you still be on his side? But forget the players, they might have influence on who's managing the club, but the ones who truly run the show are the owners. Imagine you're the owner of a club, and the manager you employ is constantly criticizing your vision and turning the fans against you. Would you want to keep him, considering he's not even winning anything significant anymore? The 3-year mark is simply a byproduct of a patterned approach. There's no curse, Mourinho doesn't lose his mojo every time his third season rolls around. He simply digs his own grave with his present, statements and promises from the previous seasons. And you know something? I can almost bet that Roma will be the last time he'll be fired on his third season. As from now on, if he lands a job at a decent side at club level, the owners will have way less patience with him. Fighting Mourinho isn't taboo anymore. Unless you're a die-hard Jose Mourinho fan, you'll be able to realize that his tactics have not evolved with time and simply don't work that well in the modern game. In my opinion, he should just transition to international football. His persona is tailor-made for short-term competitions, and he would spend long periods away from the spotlight, which would help preserve his image in front of both the fans, owners, and especially the players. With Brazil looking for a manager, Saudi Arabia wanting to take their national team to the next level, and even Portugal, in case they flop in the Euros, could be valid options. But what do you think? Should Mourinho continue coaching at club level or transition to a national team? Let me know your opinion in the comments so we can start the discussion. Drop a like so that YouTube knows you want to watch more content like this, and subscribe to never miss the most interesting football discussions, stories, and top 10 lists. Thank you for watching till the end. I appreciate you, and I will see you soon.